There we go, mate. Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. It's Monday afternoon. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am delighted to be joined by Quinny and also James French. Yes, we are still in the midst, I guess, of an international break until the football comes back. We won't labour the fact. We'll get stuck in about the Celtic. However, there's one or two wee points I want to raise in relation to the international break. I was looking at the caps figures, and I know that footballers win a hell of a lot of caps these days. You know, you've got guys like Ronaldo winning 200 caps or something. He's just going to play until he's 50, right? And you've got a group of players there that Stevie Clarke obviously really trusts for Scotland. And they've all, you know, there's a clutch of them got a huge amount of caps. But I was having a wee look at Tony Ralston. I think Tony's done really well on an international level to get as many caps as he has done. Quinny, Tony Ralston, right? Let's think about the Bricky. Only one Lisbon Lion has got more Scotland caps than Tony Ralston.
Wow.
That's where we are. Is that more of a kind of modern football thing? Is it an element of that? The fact that we didn't get enough caps when we should have, when you consider how few caps even, you know, Jimmy McGrory got earlier on? Or is it just where we are really in relation to quality?
I think it's a kind of two-pronged thing. There's more caps available to be earned, I think, you know, because those tournaments when the Lisbon Lions, etc., were playing, you know, you're talking about like 12-team World Cups or something like that, probably, and Euros of 2 groups of 4, I think, and that sort of structure. So just, you know, less qualifiers, less final tournament action. But I do think it's a modern thing as well, in the sense of, like, you're talking about quality there. In the modern, like, international scene, for smaller nations like us, certainly, the players you've got at your disposal it's never been more important that the fringe guys or the backup ones are like as high a level as possible, you know, because before it was always be about like domestic stars that might rise up the ranks, etc. But I think over the time, just with the innovations in like sports science and physical application, tactical understanding of players, you see it more and more with more countries. If they've got a player playing for a team in the English Premier League 3 times a season, they could be a starting player for any number of teams around Europe and the world because of the floor kind of level that they bring. And Ralston is maybe a kind of a watered down version of that, where we've got very high level fullbacks for Scotland. You know, we can always seem to have 1 or 2 of them floating around, it feels like. But even in the absence, or all of them seem to be preferred to play left back. You know, he's just found himself in the right place at the right time, can just reliably, you know, I'm thinking about the games in the Euros. I know he had a real calamity in one of the games. I forget if it was Hungary or Germany, but you know, he acquitted himself at that level, like, pretty well enough, you know, to let the rest of the team get on with the game. And part of international football is a big part of it. I remember Stevie Clarke, last thing I'll say on it, I remember when he got the job saying that was a huge focus he had, was getting a huge cap count out of the core players he was going to rely on. Because when he took the job, all those guys you're looking at in that clutch, I don't know exactly who they all are, but I dare say they've got 80% of their caps under Steve Clarke, you know, so he's really had that kind of focus on lifting experience and cohesion.
No, you're spot on. There are a lot of big kind of cap counts when you look at the squad that Stevie Clarke's got. Not taken away from the achievement of Tony Ralston, of course. And he has played for Scotland for every 6 games that he's played for Celtic. So there you go, the Bricky. 23 caps for Scotland. But you've got guys like McGinn and Robertson who potentially will win 100 caps, Quinny. That's where we are right now. You know, it's not like they're in the nether regions of the 30s or mid-30s and in their early 30s. And I know that Robertson's got a bit of stick this week, but these guys have got 80-plus caps each. A quick update from yourself, James, on Ireland. What's happening with the Irish international side?
Yeah, not good, Paul. Not good. We've been in a state of kind of just despair, really, for the last 10 years. I think Euro 2016, last time we were at a tournament. It's quite funny. I was having this conversation with someone the other day that if you look at kind of Scotland squad, the probably main strengths midfield is obviously real quality with the likes of Ferguson, McTominay, McGinn, Christie, all these kind of really high level players. And then our strengths and weaknesses our weakness is our midfield. It's really poor. And then our strengths will be obviously Kelleher in goals. We've Nathan Collins, who's playing Premier League at centre back, Jake O'Brien, Liam Scales, obviously. You probably say our centre backs are like main strength. And then you look at the Scotland squad, Scotland squad, and the main weakness is the centre backs and the goalkeeper. So if we could kind of merge a team together, we'd have like a quality international team, in my opinion. And that's obviously can't happen. But from an Irish point of view, it's Heimer Hallgrimsson came in at the start of the last Nations League campaign, in for Stephen Kenny, who got the job after he done a really good job with Dundalk in the League of Ireland. Took them to European group stages for the first time ever, Irish team to be at that stage. Got the Ireland job, kind of blooded a lot of new talent. The squad kind of needed a real refresh. He blooded a lot of guys kind of under the age of 21 into the squad. Kind of failed to really have any genuine kind of success in qualifiers. Like, we were kind of out of it before it even got started a lot of the time. There were some high moments, like we did beat Scotland. We beat yourselves 3-0 like years ago, I think, maybe in his first year or two in the Nations League. But there was just kind of a lot of poor results against poor teams. Like, lost to Luxembourg at home, lost to Armenia away. We kind of had this really talented generation, and it hasn't really clicked and turned into like a real quality international team. Heimer Hallgrimsson then, as I said, came in at the start of the last Nations League campaign, taking over like a team that is in a much better place than it was under Kenny. Kind of like guys playing in the Premier League, the likes of Kelleher, Collins, O'Brien, Evan Ferguson, obviously at Roma, Troy Parrott, who's at AZ Alkmaar, and he's doing quite well there in the Dutch league. So like there's a lot more quality in this current Irish team, but we're kind of still haven't really put it together in the current group at the minute. We are bottom after drawn 3-3 with Hungary to start the group, losing away in Armenia 2-1, and then losing to Portugal the other night 1-0 in what was it was a good performance defensively. Didn't really show much going forward, but like we conceded in the 90+ first minute. So we did hold out for a while, but just ultimately we're undone. And obviously Caoimhín Kelleher saving Ronaldo's penalty as well, which I'm sure you're seeing. So that was a small win for us, considering how poor we are at the minute. We'll take anything we can get. But yeah, at the minute the kind of main hope comes from that Hungary and Armenia are quite poor in our group. If we win our remaining games, even if we kind of lose to Portugal at home, we still do have a chance of getting the playoff. But as I said, the hope kind of more comes from how poor Hungary and Armenia are rather than how competent we are. So yeah, not a great time to be an Irishman football wise at the minute. I know you've obviously got 6 points from 6 in the current break, and are you're kind of worrying about the two performances in the games. As an Irishman, we just kind of would take the points, to be honest. We'd be happy enough in your situation. But I do get the frustration with Clark and the kind of conservatism that he shows a lot of the time in his selections and his tactics.
I think he sometimes he's quite self-deprecating in that way, Quinny, where he says, look, you all find me quite a boring guy and all that. He checks that quite a bit during the press conferences. But as you said, James, in terms of international football, you take the wins. You take the opportunity to qualify when we went through that lengthy period of not qualifying for any kind of major tournament. Lots to discuss today, and I think that the big tagline for me is that whilst the chaos surrounds us, Quinny, it's all about recalibrating ourselves, refocusing, maybe even resetting, and ensuring that we do not have a set of ambitions that is based on just how good, bad, or indifferent any team playing out at Ibrox is, because that has been one of the biggest concerns. It was actually raised on last Monday, which it's been a long week actually since that meeting at Celtic Park. We've gone through that, so with a fine tooth comb, really. We've gone over every single detail of that meeting, but it was basically there was this feeling that a lot of people within the club are only happy to be ahead of Rangers. And what I'm saying today is, over the last couple of weeks, the banter years continue, Quinny. I mean, we can all have a right good giggle and all that. And we'll continue to do that because it's football, right? However, we cannot gauge our own success on that of the team playing out at Ibrox, Quinny. And I think it's something that we've been very complacent with in recent years. I think it's something we've been very guilty of as a football club. And it's really, really important that we continue to focus on the fact that it doesn't matter how good or bad they are. We need to fulfill our own potential, Quinny.
Yeah, I think that's one of the worries we've kind of always had with the transfer policy, because I was really glad to see that was one of the questions that get put to the board by the fan collective at the meeting. I went through the minutes myself with a fine tooth comb, as I'm sure everyone else did. And when I seen that the question was asked, the strategy looks like Rangers +1. I was very grateful to. Was it PG Paul Quigley? Was it him that said that? I can't remember who was credited with it.
Yeah, yep.
He was in with some great comments on the transcript. So yeah, very good to see that was kind of really put to them on the nose, and they flat out like just refuted it. And historically, like, you just need to scroll back the transfer windows when Rangers weren't in the league. Very clearly, that was like the strategy. Whether it still is now or not, maybe is a more of an argument, but it does feel like, you know, the way we've come into this season, that we were taking the league for granted, really, because all of our focus in chat has been about Kairat and Champions League and money and splashing the cash. But as we sit there now, like, the league it's not in our hand. You know, there is a fight to be had, and every game is must win as it sits right now, just with the lack of goals we've been scoring. So that does kind of eat back into that Rangers +1 mentality where, you know, as long as we're ahead of them, who really cares? We can, you know, because we were feeling this through the transfer window. We were playing games when the transfer window was open, and they were still, you know, banter-yearing their way through matches. You know, so you certainly feel that they do check the results at the end of the weekend. They go, we'll maybe try and negotiate that deal down, or we don't need to buy that guy this week, or, you know, we'll try and you know, see how the chips fall out elsewhere. So it's a hard thing to say that's not our strategy, I think, from all the evidence we've got.
The big thing for me, Quinny, is that I've always said this. I just feel, and it's not everybody, because, you know, even on the back of, for example, the This Is Acsom episode that we put out on Friday night, which is called The State of Paradise, where we do a deep dive into the stadium and what we believe as Celtic fans we should be planning to do with the stadium. But not just that, not to make it look better aesthetically, but to also generate revenues, and not revenue streams that always rely on the fan. I'm going to be coming back to that in a few seconds. The reason I brought it up, Quinny, is because you have that opinion, but it's not a universal opinion. We had a lot of people come back to us saying, this is a great stadium. You know, what you're moaning about, you're looking for things to moan. Absolutely not. We're not looking for things to moan about. We're looking to maximise the ability that Celtic possesses. And one thing that just occurred to me this morning in relation to everything that's been happening, because the Fans Collective have also got a lot of kind of negative reactions from some Celtic supporters who think that, you know, we are the problem, if you like, the rabble rousers, the activists. We are the issue. And all I would say is this, that if you want what's best for Celtic, and Celtic Fans Collective do, what you'll find is people will back you. And when you look at that open letter, with the 420 plus groups signing up to that open letter, the support was unbelievable. Why? It wasn't because someone had an agenda or a narrative to spin for their own benefit. It was because they want the best for Celtic. And if the current board at Celtic had that outlook, that vision, that attitude, then we would back them as well, Quinny. This isn't just like, you know, perennially because of what's happened in the past and, you know, PTSD from '94, we will always hate the board of Celtic Football Club. No, we'll always challenge them. But see if they have the right vision and the ambition to match the fan base, Quinny, we'd be right behind them. I mean, let's be honest about this.
Yeah, we don't need many excuses to jump on the bandwagon and say we're going to win the Champions League, or we're going to win quadruple trebles and go invincible, and we're going to beat everyone 5-0 every weekend before the first whistle blows. You know, we don't need that much encouragement to get behind the team. You're spot on there. And I think, like, that's, you know, the approach and the attitude to the stadium, and the kind of, like, if we're not really stretching the club forward, which is, I think, a big part of the thing that we're talking about here, like splashing the cash, Champions League, and the club are like, no, we are actually, you know, so a lot of that statements and a lot of the words that came out of it was like, we accept that we failed in this transfer window, but they're basically saying that's like a fly in the ointment. That's an anomaly. That was a one-off. You know, they're basically still kind of defend overall apparatus. And if that is the case, the Battlefield thing, I give them lots of leeway for, or, you know, latitude for. The Lennoxtown stuff has been nice developments over the last couple of years, but you would expect that to be, and I know the stadium discussion comes up all the time, you know, but like you say, in terms of some of the just general modernization that's required of, like, venue facilities, of, you know, maximizing how you can get rev from different, you know, the merchandising stalls and how all that's constructed, should be in that spot as well. And when you see that stuff isn't done and it's neglected or not even thought of, then it undermines that whole kind of overview of, oh, well, that was a one-off, or we are more big picture. We're not thinking about the immediate term stuff, because a lot of the big picture stuff isn't really get the lines coloured in yet.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, I think we are very short term. I think that was my biggest frustration going into that meeting, and then obviously during the meeting is the short termism. We cannot operate as a football club just looking at the next transfer window, not even just looking at the next campaign. We need to have a 5 to 7 year vision. Of course we do, but we need to set things up that are going to benefit Celtic Football Club for the next 25, 30, 50 years, 100 years. Why, because when you get to my age, guys, particularly you, young James, right? And next year you think Love Street. Next year, Love Street was 40 years ago. Then you start getting a bit, you think to yourself, that is bonkers, because, it's quite abstract to use a term that you used, James, Quinny, in the past. Time becomes quite abstract, because you're like, there's no way that was 40 years ago. But yeah, it was 40 years ago. And then in a couple of years' time, the centenary season will have been 40 years ago. And you remember the club turning 100, and then it's going to turn 140. So before you know it, half a century will have passed as a Celtic supporter. So you've got to start looking way into the future. It cannot be, and I've always used this analogy of Gromit on the train track, laying the track as he's hurtling along in the Wallace and Gromit movie, where we have no plan. It's just like, get that track done as quickly as we can, because we're going at such a pace. We need to ensure that we know exactly what's round every corner. Now, James, you're a wee bit younger, so you will get stick, as will others like Patrick McGill. We're no ageist, by the way, Quinny. We're just jealous. Let's be honest, we're just jealous. But see, when you look at it yourself in relation to where the club's ambition lies, is it something that you're aware of? Is it a frustration that you have, that it's almost as if Rangers +1, as long as we're just that wee bit, that 1 point ahead of Rangers, there's people at the football club who's happy? Is that something that resonates with you, James?
Yeah, I think it's something that, like myself, but a lot of Celtic fans would have had that inkling feeling for the last 10, 12 years, like the numerous failures to qualify for the Champions League, the numerous failures to kind of build from a position of strength, to show some modernisation, to show some ambition, to not just try and beat Rangers the league, but to also have an impact in Europe. And we've seen that ongoing cycle the last 10, 12 years just constantly repeat itself. And from my perspective, we're at a point where the dam's kind of finally burst, and there's now kind of unity in the support, and they're kind of behind that that movement for change within the club, and that this kind of lack of ambition and just kind of sheer incompetency from the top kind of can't really happen anymore, because we've seen it happen so many times, and I think people are just fed up, and this is the breaking point. And it's really good to see the Celtic fans collective come together, Celtic Trust. Obviously, you're talking about all the Celtic fan media groups coming together and signing that letter. It just shows there's like a real unity among the support at the club for change, and I think that's something that we haven't had probably definitely since I've been supporting the club. I can't remember kind of a unity there within the support against the board and against the kind of poor way the club are handling the club, and even communication as well, which I know a lot of people be aware of kind of how poor that's been recently. So from my perspective, it's definitely just about wanting more from the club, because, like, in my opinion, I think the club is just it's not tapping into how big it is. Like, even in, obviously for myself in Ireland, but in America and Canada and Australia, all across the world, Celtic is a huge club. It's an institution, and I feel like a lot of the time the club don't tap into that. And like, we'd be here all day talking about the issues kind of in terms of modernisation and stuff, so we won't go on too long. But I think just in terms of that as well, I think the club could be doing a lot more to kind of tap into fans here in Ireland, but also in America and Australia. And even obviously a lot of my friends here in Ireland would support Premier League teams like Liverpool and Manchester United, Leeds. And if they obviously opinion of Celtic be that they're a huge club, Champions League club. If I told them some of the stories about like Luke McGowan, the signing of him, obviously the Jacob Brum kind of transfer negotiations during the summer, the constant lowballing of transfer fees and stuff like that. If I told them some of them stories, they'd be absolutely shell shocked. Like, they wouldn't be able to comprehend how a club as big as Celtic is operating at that level. So yeah, from my perspective, it's just about wanting more for the club, because I think it's those at the top of the club, I think, they're sitting on a winning lottery ticket and they just kind of won't cash it in, which is the most disappointing thing, because the ceiling is so high with Celtic as a club on the pitch and off the pitch, and they're just not really tapping into it.
You're spot on, and brilliantly illustrated as well there, James. I think it's the same in all walks of life. So in relation to a Celtic State of Mind, for example, Quinny, I look at what we're doing just now, and it's not going to stay the same. We're going to have to progress and develop it. So there are plans probably for the next 3 years, and this is an independent Celtic fan channel, Quinny. So we have plans for the future on a much smaller scale, but maybe not as small as people will think. So I'm going to go back to something that James said there, right? So if we're talking about, for example, the way that we have conducted ourselves, I remember fairly recently Scott Brown, and I'll ask him this in December when he joins us in Glasgow. Ticket link under the video, by the way, shameless plug, is when he spoke about the fact that obviously you'll remember Rangers and Celtic were vying for his attention at the time. And we spent big in terms of a Scottish transfer back then to bring him to Celtic Park from Hibs. But he spoke about the difference between the approach from the two clubs. So at that time, we were able to kind of wow him into signing for Celtic. And I'm not saying it was just down to the way we treated him, but obviously there was a talk about, I think, meeting Rangers in a car park somewhere, whereas Dermot Desmond put out the red carpet, flew him down to London, all that kind of stuff. And it's not just about being, throwing money about for the sake of it, but it's about having a level and a standards and a class about you, Quinny, whereby we want you to sign for us, and this is what we're prepared to do. Listen, I know we've been stung in the past. I remember the Jimmy Bullard story, where basically he lorded it up for a weekend on Dermot Desmond's platinum card or whatever it was, and then went and signed for somebody else and all the rest of it. But I'm kind of glad we never signed Jimmy Bullard, to be fair. However, the example remains, and I want us to be that level of football club. There's a great book on my shelf behind me, right, written by the late Pat Woods and Pete Burns, and I've not of Dead or Alive fame, and I've mentioned it a few times because it's called O Hampden in the Sun. It's a fantastic book, right? Go and check it out, because it's not just about that one game. It's about the culture of both clubs going into it. And they talk about, at that time, Ibrox versus Celtic Park. And the way that Pat describes it is almost as if, Ibrox back then was Rangers' palace. They called it the stadium. Everything was like, you go into the marble staircase and all that. When we've heard all this before. But I've heard Celtic within the club, people at Celtic saying the way that Rangers did things. And by the way, we know that in their latter days, it wasn't their money they were spending, but they did things right against a backdrop of Celtic doing everything on the cheap. And we're talking right up to the point of when we were replacing bulbs and in the floodlights, we were buying them second hand for Hampden rather than replacing them, Quinny, stuff like that. We were doing everything on the cheap, right up to the point of the temporary stand behind the goal. Even when Fergus had taken over, we would dismantle it after every game and rent it out until the next home game, and then reassemble it just to make a few extra quid. Unbelievable, right? And for me, I think we need to get away from that. We need to get away from being Barra boys when it comes to the way that we conduct ourselves, conduct our business, but present ourselves as well, Quinny. We should be looking at Celtic Park, and it should live up to its name, Paradise. And it's just not. Now, that does make me tap into Friday night's episode. We were talking, Steve and I, about not only coming back to the well and asking Celtic fans constantly for more and more money, Quinny, we were talking about the possibilities of opening up the stadium to other income streams that doesn't involve Celtic fans paying for it. And I'm talking, right, you make the stadium so good that you can have a European final there, or maybe on a regular basis. You make the stadium in such a way that there's access to have concerts. There used to be concerts at Celtic Park. There hasn't been since it was rebuilt. So things like income streams like that, the advertising on the media mesh, not giving that one up, by the way, Quinny, going to keep going on about that. And various other aspects of it where you are selling space within the stadium to catering companies inside and out. And it's not all about just going back to the fan constantly to say, we need more of your money and squeezing that same cash cow. So we spoke about it on Friday, but we're going to follow this up, Quinny, because again, you think, right, that's one element of the football club that we can do better, and it will generate more income. if you take the capacity to 7,000, including extra corporate, all that kind of stuff, it's incredible. So someone got in touch with me after it, Quinny. I want to hear your thoughts on this. And they said that not long after we'd moved back to Celtic Park, so obviously 94, 95 was Hampden Park, 95, 96 was temporary stand days, 96, 97 the full stadium, right? He went on a tour of the stadium. And when he went on the tour, obviously it was quite new at the time. And he says to the stadium guide, the tour guide, is there plans to make the stadium level, redo the main stand? And the guy says to him, oh yeah, that's the next phase. We're going to have the new stand. So basically 30 years ago. So he went recently to do the stadium tour again. And then obviously his view on it was that the stadium looks really tired now. It needs all this upgrade. So he asked the same question to a different tour guide, obviously 30 years later. And the tour guide goes, why would you, when you've got a waiting list of 12,000, why would you build a new stand? Now, if that's the culture and the attitude within the club, I find that astonishing. The reason you would is because you've got a waiting list. It's like we're moving from 60, let's say a capacity of 60 to 70, whereas in the past we were going from an average attendance of in the 30s and we're building a 60,000 stadium. It's not quite the same leap, is it? I mean, it's just basically maintaining and improving what you've already got rather than completely rebuilding it at risk.
I think, yeah, it's definitely a less big of a jump. And I think before the 30 to 60 move is kind of with the cry of build it and they will come kind of vibe at the time, of course.
Yeah.
I think you could apply that to this as well, because the waiting list is like, I'm not on the waiting list because why would I be? Like, the list is so bloody long. Why waste the time filling in the form, get your hopes up, blah, 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 the rest of it. Just try and get tickets ad hoc once in a while as it is. So I kind of get a little bit of the premise of like, if your waiting list is 12, why would you go beyond that? Because then you won't, you'll have excess. And, we've seen a really bad example of that in the kind of the back end of the Dialect era when we weren't selling seats and tickets everywhere. So I kind of get the premise of it a little bit, but that's also conditioned on there's no more customers available or there's no more potential for the waiting list to get any bigger or, some other kind of moves could be made in that sense. But I make it quite right. I think it's I had to be kind of thought to myself when you were talking about all that there, because isn't it quite stereotypical that the people that are kind of known for secret clubs and lodges and all this kind of stuff have got like a big fancy house, kind of for their football team in a way, quite stereotypically. And maybe
I don't know who you're talking about, Quinny. Who could that possibly be? Montrose? Who's it?
Yeah, like they go everywhere. They've always got gloves on, so they don't get their fingerprints or any dirt on stuff. They keep everything nice and clean and shiny, and all the rest of it. So I just thought that was a kind of funny wee, it's funny how that kind of association goes, isn't it? And we maybe need to. I think in this case, with all the stuff you're talking about there, when we're approaching a player, when we're looking to sign a manager, or when we're looking at doing anything, being approached by Celtic should feel like being approached by one of the big historic teams in European football. Now I've never been a professional player. I've never had any big team approach me, but I've listened to enough of them that have transferred, and you kind of see ins and outs now thanks to social media, little behind the scene clips of people getting signed, etc. And the guys that are right at the top of the food chain, like the players. And it's not even about make them feel wanted and everything as well. But it's, I really do hate the words, right? But it's the only word that's appropriate at this point. But it's like aura. It's like vibe. It's like the culture. It's one of those things that you can't really touch. You can't really put a finger on it. But it's like, like signing for Real Madrid, signing for Barca. There's just another thing that's in the air, that's in the equation. The people you talk to, the legends of the club when you sign, the manager, the team, going to the training ground, going to the stadium. And when Scott Brown signs for us in that kind of way, you can definitely feel that through the story, that Celtic just have a bit more of that about them in the mix here. But when we go onto the continent, and James brought up Jacob Briem, we're not bringing that to the equation in that situation whatsoever. We're bringing, Poundland atmosphere to this, where it's like nickel and diamond, and we didn't answer the fax machine, we didn't put ink in the fax machine, we didn't return phone calls and stuff, and it's so. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say back to all that. I'm not really sure how to wrap that up, but there you go.
The fax machine. Yeah, it's fax machines and pagers. No, you're right. It's all about doing things a certain way. And the term that the club continually uses is world class, Quinny, right? And it's one of the things where it's like, how can you gauge that? How are you able to actually say that is or that isn't world class? What I would like to see is I would like to see a Celtic class before we do anything. What is Celtic class, and attain that level of standard. And that will undoubtedly be better than anybody else in Scotland. And then obviously you look towards Champions League. I'm going to bring in some of these comments. Thanks everybody for getting involved. And if you watched the first 2 minutes and thought this was going to be an international roundup, then you were wrong, because it only lasted 2 minutes. And now we're talking about Celtic. Joe Hamilton, here we go. You're on the YouTube, Afternoon Troops. It's time for Brendan and the boys to reclaim our top of the league position. That's our job. Yes, we are going to dive into that. Celtic's next 3 fixtures are Dundee away from home, Sturm Graz at home, opportunity to get back into it with the Europa League, and then of course Hearts at Tynecastle. And Hearts are a team, don't know if I mentioned this previously, but Quinny did tip them this season to be second in the league, so I'll be asking Quinny for his update on that. Brendan McCarthy, no many folk laughing now, by the way, Quinny, I've got to say on your prediction of Hearts finishing second. Hail, hail, boys. If the board are thinking we are happy with being ahead of the evil dead, they're crazy. Good luck with the podcast awards. Thank you, Brendan. Yes, I've just checked this morning, actually. It should have closed at midnight last night. It's still open. So if you want to give us a wee last-minute sneaky wee vote in the back door or in the side door, the link is underneath this video. All you need to do is you can scroll right down to our category, which is Best Podcast International, or you can click on the drop-down menu and just select that, and then select Acsom, put your vote in, and away we go. Hopefully we can go down to Leeds and come back with a result like we did back in 1970. Talking of which, this is a perfect segue. Obviously, we beat Leeds United in the semi-final European Cup 1970 over 2 legs. We met Feyenoord in the final, and they beat us 2-1 after extra time. And at the weekend there, guys, this isn't just an opportunity to have a dig at Celtic. At the weekend there, we play Feyenoord in a Legends game. They call it the Legends game. I was looking at the Celtic lineup. It was quite interesting. I felt there were some faces like Christian Gamboa. I thought he was still playing. But yeah, Gamboa played a few minutes, and guys like Big Samaras and all that still look fit. I like these games because I think that football clubs now have foundations, right? They've got the charitable arm of the football club. And if you can bring in guys that are of that ilk, who are still fit enough and it's not going to turn into an embarrassment, and you set these games up, I think there is an appetite for it, right? There definitely is an appetite. And we've actually played 2 in the last wee while. So we played Man United recently, and we've gone over and we played Feyenoord, and that was in memory of Wim Jansen, and I hope it's every single season that we do that. But the one thing I'm going to say here, I'm going to start it off as an observation, guys, rather than just criticise. It's an international break. And from the comments coming in at the early part of this podcast, I'm not sure everybody enjoys international breaks. You want your Celtic fix, right? So I'm thinking to myself, is the game televised anywhere? Turns out Feyenoord covered the game. So it's on the Feyenoord TV channel, which I only discovered 10 minutes before kickoff, shared it on the socials. Had I known earlier, I probably would have covered it because nothing else was happening in the world at Celtic over the weekend. So apologies for anyone who would have enjoyed that. I would have enjoyed it myself. But my criticism comes in when I watched the footage, and I thought the footage was absolutely tremendous. And I'll tell you why, right? Not only did they film the game, they had referee and player cams, right? So I'm guessing they're just a wee stick-on cams where when Scott Brown gets sent off in a benefit charity match, you can actually watch it from the referee's perspective, and Bruno giving him dogs abuse. It's great. It's great content. And then they were jumping back into the dugout where there was like live interviews with people who had maybe, like Van Hooijdonk comes off and he gets interviewed live and he's sitting there with beads of sweat on his brow. Anyway, it was done really, really well. What frustrated me was that I wasn't aware that it was going to be screened live on Feyenoord TV, as I said, but it should have also been on Celtic TV. Right now, I'm a Celtic TV subscriber, and I'm looking for added value, and I'm thinking, right, international break. This is an open goal, Quinny. I mean, the broadcasting rights for a charity game are not going to cost the earth, right? So you think to yourself, let's give a wee bit of added value to the Celtic TV punters who pay their dues all over the world. And this morning I had to pick up my sister. Happy birthday, Millie, 50. Happy 50th birthday. I had to pick her up this morning, and we were having a wee chat, and I said to her, the same groans and moans that I'm saying to you. My family are obviously bored of this. They just glaze over and stop listening. They've been listening to it for 47 years. And I said, you know how many subscribers Celtic TV have globally? Ah, she was saying, oh man, must be hundreds of thousands, man. That must be like huge, the amount of people who subscribe to that channel to, keep up to date with Celtic news and views and reviews and archives and live games and reactions. 11,000 people subscribe to Celtic TV worldwide. 11,000. 5,000 in the UK, 6,000 elsewhere. That is astonishing, right? And I'm telling you, I've done my research. That is the figure. 11,000, and it is no wonder. Imagine these opportunities, guys, right? Where you've got Feyenoord, you've got the history, you've got a European Cup, you've got Wim Jansen, you've got Larsson, Bobby Petter. Let's not forget Reggie Blinker, Glenn Loovens. You've got a history with this football club, right? You can celebrate stopping the 10 because obviously Wim was the man. And what did we do? We didn't even broadcast it. Never mind do some nice wee packages before the game. A wee studio package at halftime, Quinny, post-match reaction, get a commentary team on it, show the old Larsson archive DVDs that we had, stopping the 10. Why not? Let's just give us 3 or 4 hours of content. And then what you might find is other people will say, that's pretty good. And, they might subscribe, and that 11,000, which I think is an astonishingly bad figure, will increase to something a wee bit more, what I would think would be the standard of Celtic. We could have done it against Man United as well, Quinny, couldn't we? I mean, you look at some of the ex-players that have played for both clubs who are great to watch, like Roy Keane, could watch him all day. Gordon Strachan, could listen to him all day. I know he never played with Celtic, but he managed. There's Henrik Larsson, of course. There's so much we could have done. Opportunities, Quinny, opportunities lost. Does that surprise you, by the way, the figure?
The figure does, especially globally. And I know that the chat's given it sail the high seas, fire stick all the way and all that kind of stuff, but I think worldwide, I'm quite surprised. That's quite a low figure, I would have thought. And surely with the charity set up, because Celtic are sending their team to it, surely they can just say, going to send us the feed for the TV channel.
I know.
And they would just say, aye, no bother, here it is, because it's not really,
should be
they're doing it for any commercial gain or something, it's, and yeah, so again, but Feyenoord are a great example of Dutch football. I think I've maybe mentioned it on here before, but Dutch football, if you really look at how all the clubs are built, it's very much more like the club is the center of the community. Like a lot of these clubs are, as you know, it's quite common throughout Europe anyway. They're like sports club originated as, where it's like, the center of the week. And Holland's a small place, as you know, but it's like the center of the town. That's where the stadium gets built, and it's a community. It's at its roots a community endeavour, which I'm not saying Celtic isn't, but it's a slightly different type of origin, as it were. But because it starts off as essentially a community centre or a community club, really in the absolute meaning of those words, and not just like some sort of label or whatever, that's very much at the heart of their team. So their media team and those charity, whoever organising that body cam thing, 100% comes from the idea of how do we make this more fun? I know. How do we make this more interesting? It's not how do we make more money, or how do we do this cheaper, or it's how do we get more Feyenoord fans to care, or how do we get this to go maybe a wee bit viral, and then next time when we do a charity match, people think, oh, I'll get a wee ticket to that, or I'll catch that on the, totally. And that comes from people who like where they work, care about where they work, and have like the authority to, we're just going to make the club as best as we can. And even if it's a little example of a charity match and putting some body cams on people, or
I know.
transfer policies, or you could go anywhere with that, then I think that really just tells you a real culture difference more than anything.
Yeah, and this is it. I'm not just looking for. I'm looking for ways that the club can improve. I'm not looking for reasons to criticise the club. There is a difference, Quinny, because I look at it and I think there's an opportunity. We could have even probably just did all that content on YouTube as a way of advertising a Celtic TV subscription and done it free for the weekend. And there's 4 or 5 hours of content for you guys. And this is what we do in Celtic TV. And you subscribe on the link below. But we don't do that kind of thing. And I think we're missing a trick. I don't think anybody in the media team, and apparently there's 30 of them, actually thought we could use that to our advantage, that Feyenoord game. Why not? Because we're always tapping in
content.
Arthur Boruc, these guys are all interesting cult figures. You've got Effie Ambrose was involved, Charlie Mulgrew, Bruni gets sent off. There's lots to discuss, as well as a historical aspect of it.
By the way, I think you mentioned Charlie Mulgrew's YouTube channel on here a week or 2 ago, maybe when you were. Yeah. I seen one of his videos like before. I can't think who was he with. It was with Larsson. So whenever the Larsson one came out, I watched that. Right, I actually caught a little bit. He did one at the weekend at Dunhill, or I'm not really a golf person. I don't know the chat, but it was lots of famous people. He was just kind of stopping them and chatting with them. And I was watching that and I was thinking, this is the sort of personality you want from, like, and sorry to make this a little bit more about content rather than on the football pitch, but that's the sort of personality you want to see coming through content. When you're talking about the interviews we get with the manager and Celtic TV and all the rest of it, you want to get a sense of, people and, who they are and who's the characters and who's the Mavericks in the changing room and everything. And, that really comes through in spades, like Mulgrew's personality and how he kind of goes about everything. And he his channel looks like it's going to do very well in my opinion. But, when you label that back against the Feyenoord thing and other club interactions that I'm just aware of, like everything at Celtic's so sterile. It's so just like, oh, we need to put 2 videos out this week. We need to interview a player this week. And it's just, hi, how do you feel this week has went? Oh, this week's went lovely, thank you. What are you thinking about next week? Next week could be okay too. And that's kind of like the end of it. It's not really, you don't get any sense of much more beyond that, so.
Personality is the word. Personality is the word. You're not always looking for somebody to be a joker in the pack. It's just about having a personality, right? Now, obviously, James, I am going to refer to the fact that you're a younger generation than us two. But in terms of content, these things are open goals, aren't they, James? I mean, they should be coming to you naturally, the fact that there's an opportunity here to engage. You're talking there about how Celtic should engage more with our Irish fan base. But I think there's opportunities for us to do that all over the place. And it was another lost opportunity at the weekend. What do you think we could do more in Ireland? Is it about visiting more in terms of bringing a team over and playing more games over there?
Yeah, I'll answer the first question first, just with regards to the social media and kind of stuff like that. I think Quinny's spot on. Like it's very much like the bare minimum. It's from an outside looking in, you're looking at the content that's uploaded weekly. It's like, as Quinny said, like we have to interview this guy. We have to upload 2 videos a week, whatever. It's like for example, you were saying about the game against Feyenoord at the weekend, the Legends game. Like they could have very easily. Someone could have went along to that, grabbed some interviews with whoever of the Celtic legends were playing, like Henrik Larsson, whoever, Scott Brown, asking him about even how Scott's doing as obviously managing Ayr at the minute. What do you think of Celtic this season? Like, and they're all just like really open goals that like you shouldn't really be missing at any football club. To be honest, it doesn't really matter kind of how big the club is. It's just easy content, like open goal content for kind of for fans to kind of watch. I kind of compare if I was to kind of give like a high bar for kind of football content and like a club that's doing a lot, I would probably say Liverpool, like with the kind of inside training access. I think they do it, I don't know how often they do it, maybe it's once a week, but they have like a 11-12 minute kind of inside training access, and they'll kind of video the players coming into training, grabbing their coffees or whatever, interaction with the barista. It seems like simple stuff and stuff that doesn't really matter, but it's building that connection from the fans to the players. It's showing the personalities. It's kind of involving the fans in the way that in the team and stuff, and really kind of showing who the personalities are, as you were saying. And I think that's like it's something Celtic are kind of really poor at doing. Like even the FIFA ratings video, I quite enjoyed, and I think a lot of fans would have really enjoyed that. But like if they could kind of do similar to what Liverpool are doing with that kind of weekly inside training vid, showing the personalities of the team and all this, I just think it just would open a lot of new avenues for them. And just as well, I think Celtic fans want to see that, so it would generate a lot of views and a lot of interactions and stuff. To answer your second question in regards to kind of what could they do more in Ireland, I do agree with you. I think they could be doing more worldwide. Like there's you've seen the number of Celtic supporters clubs that signed the open letter. Like there is Celtic fan supporters group all over the world. Like we're, in terms of like what European football clubs, are one of the biggest in the world. So the supporters club wise, like with the number of them we have all over the world, as I said. So like it's not just an Irish thing. It's America, it's Canada. But to be fair to the club, they have came over in recent years and played friendlies. I was at the Sligo Celtic game. Was it last year? Maybe 2 years ago. I was at that, and yeah, Luis Palma. He looked like an absolute world beater. Yeah, it's I love kind of seeing Celtic obviously in the flesh, and I'd only get to go over maybe once a year, but I think it's important for even people my age or even younger, kind of younger kids, to see Celtic players and see them making the effort coming over to Ireland, because they, like Celtic, probably have lost a generation of people to the Premier League, like obviously in kind of the early 2000s when the Premier League boom started, and Celtic probably lost a lot of interest and support to that, from that generation to the Premier League. So I think now it'll be about kind of building that next generation and of having an interest in Celtic. And I think to do that, you just kind of have to come over once or twice a year, play a friendly against one of the League of Ireland teams, which, like, the League of Ireland is growing hugely at the minute. Like it's one of the fastest growing leagues in Europe at the minute. And I think they've obviously played Sligo. They were over playing Cork as well. Like, so I just think if an annual trip in the summer across the water, I think would build the interest and just kind of really create that association from Irish fans to Celtic, because a lot of Irish fans, football fans, would obviously say they support Celtic because of the history and all, but they wouldn't actually know a whole lot about kind of the player, maybe some of the players, how the season's going and stuff. And I think you could recreate that connection if you do make that effort and try and kind of come over once or twice a year.
Without a doubt, and tap into the CSCs, you know, with regards to the relationship with them, you know, and also bring maybe events over regularly as well. We come over to Ireland, and you know, people are just delighted to have a Celtic event with ex-players and stuff like that, as well as a game. So I think there are so many things we can do. And as I say, not an opportunity to take a kick at Celtic, an opportunity for us to maximise our potential, really. James Devine, you're on the X platform. I love my country, but it's Celtic first for me. James, I've said on this show before, yeah, I'd love to see Ireland and Scotland qualifying for the major tournaments. But in terms of international football, it's all about the Celtic. That's why I opened up with that little stat in relation to Tony Ralston. And we got an update from James on the Ireland situation. But yeah, I would like to see them doing well, but it's all about Celtic for me. Jungle Lion, always a pleasure to see you on the YouTube. Celtic can't let Maida go in January with the African Cup of Nations on. Then again, it's this board, they probably will. Right. A couple of wee pointers to this, because already we're 3/4 of the way through today's episode, and it doesn't feel as though I've covered everything I wanted to cover, but that's just the way it is, Quinny. So we're going to have to extend the duration of a Celtic State of Mind on a daily basis, I think, moving forward. So initially then, I'll leave the Maida thing to the secondary point. I was looking this morning, Quinny, at, because one of the big things we're going to do is recruitment. So we've done the stadium, the State of Paradise. We did that first episode on Friday. We're going to be looking at the recruitment. We're going to be looking at the board, the fan engagement, this kind of thing. We're also going to be looking at the academy. There's various things we're going to be really focusing on in the coming weeks. So I was looking at the recruitment and I thought to myself, right, Jim Orr had a very good point, I felt, at the beginning of the season. He said Celtic should always aim to be 2 players net up after every window. What he meant by that is the normalisation of losing a big talent like Nicholas Kuhn, for example, Matt O'Reilly, we know the list. That's just normal. So as long as we come out the window having replaced the guys, and we don't know how successful the replacements are going to be, Quinny, but having replaced them with a level of quality that you think is capable of replacing the player, maybe not immediately, but obviously down the line, and also bringing in more quality to improve the side. And Jim's take on this, big shout out to Jim, actually, he was on BBC's Sports Sound yesterday, and he was brilliant for 15 minutes, talking to Michael Stewart and Tom English. And I think that, to be fair, Michael Stewart agreed with most of what Jim said, and he seemed to understand where the frustrations were coming from. So big shout out to the OG rebel, the Oracle, Jim Orr, yesterday for his appearance. And he did it last minute as well, by the way. So my point here is, I was looking at this summer's transfer business, Quinny, and I'm thinking to myself, right, who would that class as decent signings so far? I don't know, we're only in October. Now, despite what a lot of people are saying, I still think Kieran Tierney improves the standard of our first 11, never mind the squad, right? I'm looking at Iheanacho and I'm thinking, right, I'm not saying he's better than, let's say, Kyogo, for example. I'm not saying that, but I think he's been a good addition. If I'm looking at the signings, I'm thinking, Iheanacho, yeah, he gets a tick for me so far. And then Tunekte, for me, the best signing so far in terms of impact. He's got that instant impact, bums off the seat, very entertaining, creates chances, etc. Sarachi, absolutely. I was a wee bit wary of the makeup of that deal initially, because of what we had done with Schlupp and Valle before. I thought it was all a bit short term. But if I'm looking at the player, I'm thinking, yeah, decent addition, Quinny. And Nygren, there's 5 players in one window. And I'm thinking, right, okay. So if we've lost one in Kuhn, if we've lost one in Kuhn during the summer, and we've lost Taylor, who was a starter, right? And we brought in 5, then we're 3 net. We're up. But how come we're not playing as though we've improved the squad?
Because that's just on an individual window. We've got hangovers of windows of not really doing that game. I love Jim Orr's his principle for it, and I think it's probably a good kind of rule of thumb that the club should probably think about in some context. Maybe they'll probably have it in some sort of more high level way of thinking about it, but it's quite a simple principle. I quite like it, and I always enjoy when he brings it up. But yeah, I think that's the main problem with it, is because I can't remember where I was. Oh, me and so on Celtics Are Here, we do a stream every Thursday night, and I was saying this to Mark when we were going through the minutes and stuff, because he was talking about we haven't replaced Nicholas Kuhn. I'm quite convinced the club were 99% sure Nygren was going to be the right winger that they were going to play, and we kind of know how Rodgers has kind of handled that and came out and said, no, he's not a winger, he's a mid, and we know all the rest of it. I then think they thought, Balquisha can play right wing. We'll be all right. He can play left and right, that guy. We've scouted him. And I would have probably went along and said the same thing, to be honest with you, because he has played bits on the right, and he is a technical player rather than a speed player. But he's not playing right wing. He's not going to play right wing. So it's we've kind of got hangovers of other windows, and then we're not fully knowing who we're buying in some regard. We know we're getting. Sorry, I need to cough. We know we're getting good players, but we think they can do a job.
Skillfully done, Quinny. Yeah, one finger on the button. I loved it.
Cursor over the mute button at all times.
Harder than it looks.
So I think coming into this window, the Jim Orr rule isn't really in effect, because every other window has been at a negative. It's been at a loss situation. So that's why this window was so important, because we knew we were a striker light. We knew we had no depth on the wings the way we wanted it to. And the defence everything that we all could talk about until the cows come home, we all knew that was all there, and very little of it really happened. The left back thing is about 4 years overdue as well. So it's good that we got Tierney and Sirachi in, but genuinely since the day Ange signed, we've been talking about left backs. That's however long ago at this point, 5 or 6 years.
Sirachi's just kicking the tin down the road as well until the summer, isn't it?
Yeah, unless if he's happy to stay on for this shift with him and Tierney, that could be a nice problem solution. But you just don't know. And again, we've not got anything foreshadowed for it or lined up in advance. So you just hope it doesn't go pear-shaped again like it did with Ida and happened to somebody else. I forget who now. But yeah, so it's a nice principle. And again, I dropped a video. You said it would be all right for me to drop a wee mention on it. But I dropped a wee video on Celtics Are Here earlier today trying to fix the current squad with 2 transfers. I think we are kind of 2 down at the moment is where I see it.
Right.
And I think if we'd had 2 more in the summer, I think the Jim Orr principle kind of kicks in. Or if we had those 2 from January, etc., then we're probably in that kilter of the ins and the outs and seeing the balance out, and the team should be further on. But I think there's just been so much quality leave window after window. With Tuneki's really hit the ground running. Last thing I'll say on this, I know James will want to come in, I'm sure. But so many of the guys we are signing are from a lucky dip bag, where they might turn into Nicholas Kuhn or they might turn into Telio. That's the gauge that we're playing with these wingers. And Tuneki looks like he's on the upper end of that scale for the better, which is nice. But it's not really I don't want to use the word luck, but it's, again, I'm kind of lost for a better word, but we're lucky that Tuneki's good. There's every chance we could have signed Tuneki and he could have just been Telio, Palma, Yang. It could have just been, and again, fullness of time, we'll see how well he does, but it's we're missing 2 more is where I'm seeing it. And especially, I know he said he didn't want to mention or think about Maeda. I think Maeda's gone in January. I just don't think there's any way, I just don't see it being any other way in January. I think we'll sell 3 players in January, maybe even a couple of loans on top of that. And yeah, if we need to sign two real first team players by January for that principle you're talking about to balance.
Yeah. Now, incidentally, by the way, I don't want you to name your players. Go and watch the Celtics Are Here video, and Quinny will tell you who the 2 guys are. But on the Maeda thing, that was the original point Jungle Lion brings up. you do look at it and think to yourself, James, unless he can shake himself out of this almost malaise, I just think football is about momentum both ways, big time. And people talk about confidence and people being confidence players. I just think, having spoken to footballers and asked them the question, there's a certain flow and there's a certain rhythm where they get into this groove of playing without thinking, and the forms there. And I think Rio's very much that type of player. And I've also heard that Rio Hatate is his own biggest critic, by the way. So I know that a lot of people have been criticising him, and I don't know if he's on your list of 3 guys that might leave, Quinny. But Rio Hatate is the guy who'll tell you when he's played bad. He's the guy who will seek some kind of solace or confidence with the gaffer and say, what can I do better? So I think he's recognising that his form's not been great. Is there another element to this, though, James, where if you bring in 5 players and you think, by the way, we brought in more than 5, you bring in those 5 that I've mentioned and you say, they should bolster either our starting 11 or the overall squad. Is there an argument to say, but a lot of the established guys are the ones that aren't performing? Could we say maybe Engels, let's be honest, he was established last season, and people have noted your similarity to him, James, in today's show once again. Engels might not be performing the way he should. Rio certainly is not. Maid is not. There's maybe an argument to say McGregor isn't. So you're bringing in 5 guys that are showing good signs, but some of your established guys, and maybe even Carter Vickers, I don't know what you think of that, Quinny. Some of the established guys maybe aren't performing as well as they should. Do you think that's an element to it, James?
Yeah, I think, but the reason for that is, like we've seen during the failed 10-in-a-row season, the build-up of guys that didn't want to be at the club, that were kind of past their sell-by date at Celtic, like the likes of Ayer, Christie, Edouard. Like, these guys should have been moved on like the summer before, or even a couple of summers before. I think, for me, like, I think there is an acceptance within the support that it's like our best players have maybe a 3-year cycle at the club before they're shipped on to the top 5 leagues in Europe or to another Champions League club. I think there needs to be an acceptance within, like, the higher levels at the club, and even Brendan Rodgers himself, that, like, we are going to lose a couple of our best players every summer. Maybe not every summer, but at least one kind of really key player every year. And it's about kind of recruiting and profiling the best fit to replace him. Like we replaced Matt O'Reilly with Arnie Engels, who had loads of minutes, under 21 midfielder in the top 5 leagues, which is, I'm guessing, how we found him. But, like, you look at him now, he's not Matt O'Reilly. He's a completely different midfield player to him. You look at Kuhn, as Quinny was saying, that, like, the club maybe identified him as Nygren as Kuhn's replacement. Like, you look at Nygren's a number 8, a box crashing number 8. He's a number 10. He's not Nicholas Kuhn, who was a dynamic, quick winger. That was obviously very prolific for us. Like, it's about profiling the best fit to replace these guys, rather than just going and just signing a player in that position. Which is mad that we're even in a situation where we have to say that, but it seems like we kind of are. And in terms of, I think the recruitment team is probably doing the best it can, really, with the, like, situation in regards to how signings get signed off and with our negotiation tactics. I think they're probably doing the best job they can with their hands tied behind their back to an extent. Like, we were linked with a lot of, like, talented guys in the summer, guys that made sense stylistically, profile wise, that if they were signed, I would have been relatively happy. So it's encouraging in that sense. But again, as you were saying, with the senior players at the club, the likes of Maida, Hatate, even Carter Vickers, who we've kind of seen a dip from him the last 2 seasons, I feel like, in particular, Maida and Hatate, they probably should have been sold, if not this summer, or if not last summer, maybe the summer before, because they've reached that kind of 3-4 year phase at Celtic where they've had their best times at Celtic. They're reaching that age where this is like we're going to get the most money for Hatate or Maida at their peak age. We need to sell now. And I just think we're making the same mistakes we made in past years. As I referenced at the 10-in-a-row season, it's just kind of the same cycle happening again, as I said earlier. And I think the likes of Maida and Hatate, Maida definitely, I think, will be gone in January, and Hatate potentially as well. And would you really blame these guys not performing to the limit, not being all there mentally when maybe they do want to move on, when they've done their time at Celtic? Like, there is a sense maybe they're a bit disgruntled that they haven't got their move. And I know you'll say you should be giving everything for your club anyway, that's your job, you're getting paid every week. But like another argument would be that this is common across world football. Like when guys don't get their move, their head's gonna go, but they're not gonna give it all for the jersey. And I think you have to respect that in terms of what Maid and Atati have done for the club in the years they've been here. So yeah, it's a tricky situation. I think it's a similar situation we found ourselves in during the failed 10 in a row season with all these kind of older guys that don't really want to be here. And as Quinny said, the only way to solve it is by letting them move on in January and bringing in guys that, as I said, stylistically fit as their replacement.
I think it's a great point, because one of my big concerns is that unhappy players and the impact that can have on the wider squad. You know, if we know the Maida situation and also the Yang, we can speculate that maybe there's a situation with Rio in terms of having been promised a move after a certain period of time at the football club that's not materialised. And I'm with you, Quinny. I think you move them on. You move players like that on. We've seen the damage it can do. And it's not, a lot of the time, it's not deliberate damage. Like, I'm down in tools and I'm going on strike. That's happened in modern football. What it's more of a psychological thing, a mental thing, whereby, and it rubs off, I think, on your nearest and dearest players and friends within the club. We're now in a situation where we're bringing in Callum Osmond and Jemai Simpson-Pusey, and they're playing B-team football. I mean, I couldn't believe that when I seen Simpson-Pusey lining up. What a fall from grace from Champions League football with Man City last season to, who were we playing? East Fife at Bayview. Nice, aye. That is some fall from grace. But there's a certain purgatory in Scottish football, Quinny, where if you're not playing first team football, you're not playing football. Shinya Yamada and Inamura will find out all about that.
Yeah, totally. Actually, something came across one of my timelines or something somewhere where it was a report from Man City saying that despite early season injuries, they're confident that JSP will get minutes as the season goes on, and they will not be recalling him in January. That was like a Man City little kind of line that came across my table over the weekend. It was like on some website somewhere, no kind of secrets or anything like that. I did find that quite surprising that they were involved in that. And you know, like the squad management, which is kind of everything that we're chatting about here, it's really vital at the next couple of transfer windows that we just sort the crap out. And there's a few things where, like, we've got 12 left wingers, we've got 45 centre backs, and after the World Cup, our only goalkeepers are Sinisalo and Duhan, and Ian Atcho's our striker. You know, with the kind of litany of backup players that we've got. So the next couple of transfer windows, we're in the Europa League this year. Let's see how that goes. Right, is just a standalone thing. We mentioned the league at the top of the show. This whole season, this transfer window in January and the summer window, Brendan's here or not, there's maybe another element of this. Everything should be driving towards the next qualifiers not going the way that these ones went, and every effort that the club's making should be with that in mind. With who will we have by next summer? Well, with the World Cup on, there's probably a list of players that you can imagine maybe moving to January or in the aftermath of the World Cup, and then you're kind of chasing the dominoes down from there. Well, if that's the situation we find ourselves in, you know, who do we need to come in and do that Jim Orr principle for us, add 2 quality players to the squad? If we're going to let 4 guys of that standing go that we're kind of chatting about the now, then how many guys need to come in and what standing they need to be for us to be Champions League? Because we're not Champions League this year, you know, so that's quite an upkick, that's quite an upturn, and the club would need to be quite aggressive to follow through with that, you would think.
I want to make one final point, because and it's only occurred to me here when you've been talking there in the last few moments, Quinny, right? We keep hearing about this moment where Ronnie Tyler's team get knocked out of the Scottish Cup in the semi-final, don't they, by Rangers on penalties. And the Rangers directors celebrate and sing and dance and mock the Celtic party, including Dermot Desmond, and it hurts his ego. And he reacts by bringing in the big gun, Brendan Rodgers. Kairat should hurt his ego, Quinny. What happened against Kairat over 210 minutes, that should be just as hurtful as that. I don't care if there is, the Kairat officials are probably more respectful and wouldn't have sang and danced in the corporate boxes, but that should still hurt his ego as much as a semi-final defeat to our lower league team. That's what happened when Ronnie Dyler was in charge. So I'm not buying this thing where we need We need him to, have his ego damaged before we react. We shouldn't be a reactive team. We should be proactive anyway, like you say. Let's start getting the transfers in now for next year's Champions League qualifiers. But if the Kairat result didn't hurt his and everybody else at Celtic's ego, there's something wrong. There's absolutely something wrong there. Thank you, every single one of you, for getting involved. Over 1,700 on the live stream. It's a Monday afternoon. The football is back. The real football, that is, this weekend. I've got to say, lots and lots of brilliant comments, so keep them coming. And in the aftermath as well, let us know in the chat on the YouTube what you think of today's discussion points. If you're in and around the Greenock area and you want to come and watch Acsom live, Chris Sutton is coming back to Greenock. Is it the first time Chris Sutton and Acsom have been together in Greenock? It could well have been. 31st of October. Fancy dress, guising optional, but the tickets are underneath this video. The link is there. Thank you all for getting involved, and thank you once again, Quinny and James French, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.